all heard that since 2008 with the Great Recession that it was going to be a long but steady recovery, which has pretty much been the case. But I thought some good news of late is we're seeing kind of across the board, particularly in the business or retail sector, some strong growth just at least since 2016. As you can see, this is in the retail sales tax revenue pertaining to retail. The blue bar is what we consider more non-reoccurring sales tax, but again, a robust growth in that area. And we've always been talking about kind of the financial cliff when we come to the build out of Snoqualmie Ridge, and then some of that revenue drops off, particularly the blue stuff that's due to like a new house is built and you sell new appliances, new roof, new furnace, and all these things where we get sales tax from. But what might soften that landing a bit is all these houses like mine that are coming up to 20 years old. I'm going through that cycle again, new appliances, new roof, new furnace, and so forth. So that may be a product of this. Again, in the business and occupation, again, the same kind of trend over the last couple, 2-3 years. We're seeing some good, strong growth there. The real estate excise tax on the sales of property, again, some good, strong growth there. One of the interesting stories here was we were always anticipating, again, in the one-time revenues on REIT that would drop off, as well as all these new houses that were being sold that were getting real estate excise tax monies would drop off. But as you can see here, what used to be the light green bars, the new homes, and in years past when we were bringing 800 new residents into the community every year or close to a home a day, that green bar was very large. But as the years have gone by and the housing stock's pretty significant and we're turning over up to 5% of the houses every year in resales, now those resales are really supplanting or taking the place of a lot of that new home sales. Housing units sold, you can see here that, again, it's been fairly steady. That growth is starting to taper off a bit. We're not doing anything near 350 houses anymore a day. Again, down to 68, 82, 37 in 2016. And you'll see in a little bit where that's going now. Turning to some of the departments, some of the great news, we've been always bouncing around the top 10 list for things like best places to live or safest communities. This is the first time now that I recall that we hit safest community on a couple of lists with the police department and a lot of the efforts the staff does to make this a quality community. So that was a nice feather in our cap for that one. And again, as I was going to say little on this because I suspected Ken might. It was a tough negotiation to extend the contract for 6 years, but I think one that we were quite satisfied with and happy with in the end. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, though, because this now goes before my city council hasn't ratified it yet, but I'm confident we're going to get there. But again, it's been a great partnership, and I guess this is a good opportunity to say, Mayor Hearing, it's been a pleasure working with you all these years. For 16 years as mayor, I can attest to the fact that sometimes this can be a thankless job and tough at times to hang in there for 16 years. I know you have just a deep passion and love for your community, and that's been indicative of even when you're running your business, you were, no one requires you to get involved regionally. And one thing Ken and I have also done is served as president of the Sound Cities Association, represents 38 cities in King County, which can keep you running around pretty hard those years you serve. So thank you to you and applaud you for your service and wish you all the best in your future endeavors. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Lastly, we have one officer, Officer K. Fortunately, we have some millennials that like to pick up this stuff because most of us are fumbling around with social media and whatnot. But Officer K's kind of done a blog out there on Facebook on a lot of the activities with police department, which is jumped from 600 views to over 16,000 just in 12 months. It's become a rather popular following on that. So many of you have perhaps seen some of those. They're kind of somewhat humorous and well written. One phenomenal achievement was the fire department. There's about 26,000 or 27,000 fire departments throughout the United States, and only about 266 achieve accreditation through the Center for Public Safety Excellence. So this puts these guys in about a one percentile of those organizations that are recognized. We're one of the only, I think of the 266, we're the only combo that has both professional and volunteers, and those volunteers are very much part of that. A couple of things that were said at that accreditation hearing is that you guys really punch above your weight class, and secondly, you deliver a lot for a little to the community, which I think is something we've been striving for. So it was great to hear that validated there. So a big kudos to them. A recent council meeting a couple weeks ago was kind of the fire department day. It was not only recognized in the accreditation. Phoebe, the therapy dog, which most of you are familiar with, was, I think, a great program we've embraced. I love that, in police and fire, there can be that stigma of it's not macho, it's not cool to be sort of say that you need help, but these are first responders that are subject to traumatic events all the time, and it's important that we take care of our own. Suicide rates for those that retire in fire and police agencies can be some of the highest of different occupations. And so for these guys to embrace and recognize in a way that has no stigma attached that, hey, having a therapy dog's a great, healthy thing for our department and part of a full function, I think is a phenomenal thing. That to me is really a mark of more courage and manliness than anything, is recognized when you need to tend to your needs as well. Mike Bailey was elevated to our deputy chief there, and Jake Fouts to the captain. So that was nice kudo. And then Brian Busby here, for those of you who've known him, has just been a phenomenal record of service to the community for many years, and is just profoundly respected by the fire department. And you'll notice if you go by the driveway or entrance road, that'll be named Busby Way as he retires in recognition of his service. And a couple of new volunteers were recognized as well. You perhaps, I mentioned last year that over the last decade, we've done a lot of emphasis on, with the growth pains we've been going through and keeping up with all the departments, and most of the focus has been on those kind of sexy outward focused departments, whether it's the parks department or police department, fire department, where there's a high touch with the community. But we didn't do as much of that same emphasis on the back office with accounting, because most folks in the public aren't going, hire more accountants. We're frustrated. And we've had great clean audit reports, particularly in the last 3 years. It's been good. But a clean audit report doesn't mean that an auditor doesn't say, hey, we see weaknesses here. It's kind of like a cop pulling you over with a taillight out and saying, hey, you didn't really harm anyone or do any harm, but you got a taillight out. I'll give you a warning. But if you come back and that taillight's still out, next time he pulls over, he's probably going to give you a ticket. So they're seeing some weaknesses in our systems or controls that could create problems, to saying, hey, tighten those up. We brought Clark and Newbern last year to do an extensive review of all that, to where the strengths and weaknesses are in the system to do that. And we're now moving into what's called an enterprise resource plan for some of you that have done that. It's basically a thorough systems-wide reboot or restructuring of all of the IT and software systems that track all of our assets, such as fleet and furnishings, fixed assets like buildings and streets, the finance, the county, human resources, and doing an integrated, coordinated, updated program. It's about a $500,000 investment, and it's a continuation of those efforts to really tend to the back office. Just, again, quick touch on this. It was really cool. We got the skate park done. This was only at about less than the $10,000 cost to the community due to Kathy Lambert and Senator Mark Mullet that helped secure grants at the state and county level. It's wildly popular, even in the late evenings or all hours. I think even during school hours, sometimes there must be kids playing hooky, because it's always filled up with some. Due to weather and whatnot, we've rescheduled this a few times, but to come out and honor particularly Senator Mullet and Kathy Lambert, to say thank you on Saturday, June 8th. It'll be a beautiful sunny day, 11 a.m. Come out for the grand opening. Not much progress on this, but I do want to keep it front and center. We're trying to make this more of a regional park. This is a real new concept in playgrounds for all access, for kids of all abilities and handicaps to access this. Larry White, one of our parks guys, is kind of heading this up. We have about $300,000 set aside for this, but are looking for about $600,000 in grants to make this happen down at Centennial Fields. Just a quick snapshot of progress. This was what I presented to you April of last year at this meeting. That's Hampton today. So great to have you guys as part of the business community here. In fact, I was just talking to Steve Rimmer, owner of the mill site, who was saying that Dirtfish loves having us here, because now with the corporate groups they bring in, they don't have to send them down to Issaquah to dump their money there, but they can keep it in town, and much more convenient for them. And that's a story across the board with many businesses here. This was the Spring Plaza, the building next door to that hotel, last year at April. That's it this year. High school last year, another crown jewel for the community last year. You'll notice the building down at the end is still kind of in its framing mode. That's it this year. Still on track to open in fall of 2019. Should be a beautiful facility. We're hitting a couple milestones here. You've been hearing me talk about, sort of about 3 or 4 years ago, I said we're kind of on the plane that's been a long 18, 20-year ride with the Snoqualmie Ridge development, but we're approaching the build out. Put your tray tables up and buckle your seat belts. We're coming in for landing. I think now we're on the tarmac and pretty much taxing into the airport there. There's literally only 3 commercial properties left to develop on Snoqualmie Ridge, two commercial properties in the business park. These parcel S21, that one may not move very far. We'd love to see an senior assisted living facility on that property. We've had a couple of nibbles at that, but nothing at this point is moving forward. But we do in this next year now are seeing some activity moving forward to have There's 3 lots, I'll get to the third one in a moment, but these 2 commercial lots developed, Lot 7 and Lot 5 in the business park. One is a kind of traditional warehouse office space, 60,000 square feet, that will be filled with typical businesses. But the more exciting one is on Lot 5, and that is the hockey rink. They just put the application in a couple of days ago. I think it's moving forward. Dana is very good about getting, or Living Snoqualmie is good about, constantly accessing applications. They want to kind of still be on the QT about this because they're investors, so don't tell anyone. But Dana did do a story, and most of the folks in the community kind of know, but it's very exciting. This would be a very, very cool thing. And there's some shots of the initial concepts of the exterior of the building. The other remaining lot, the last final remaining lot in the business park is right next to where the Church on the Ridge is currently leasing space, and they want to build a church basically there, so they're moving forward with that. The foundation is under construction as we speak. I haven't visited this in a couple years, but here's the population growth we're experiencing right now. But as you can see, it's not quite the rapid growth we had in past years. It's starting to taper off a bit, but we're literally seeing the light at the end of the tunnel here. It sounds kind of surreal, but we literally only have 14 single-family home lots left in all of Snoqualmie Ridge to build here. And that's on parcel S22, and then that's it for single-family homes, and the single-family homes for the Ridge are pretty much wrapped up. The remaining one, of course, that you're all familiar with, that the business community, as this comes forward, you want to let your employees know that want to afford a place to be able to live and work here, is the Panorama Homes project, 191 units of affordable housing. So that's the only other residential piece. So between those two, that's a little over 200 new residents between the 14 and the 191. And at about 2.5, 3 residents per household, we're looking at maybe 500 new residents, and then we're pretty much tapered off in Snoqualmie Ridge, just done in terms of residential growth. And that's the current state of the Panorama project. Behind you see the Snoqualmie Valley Hospital off there in the distance. The only other another one I think that's been a curiosity. There's a lot down here in the bottom, just to the west of the Parkway, off of Swenson, that the LDS or Mormon churches bought several years ago. They came through and processed plans about 5 or 6 years ago, and we still have no word as to whether they're going to do anything. But I thought it'd be curious for folks to. It's not a factor of if, but when. So in terms of full build out and seeing what the whole completion is going to look like. This was the plan that they submitted, so that's what you can expect to see on that site. Again, it could be 1 year, it could be 10 years from now before that comes forward, but very likely to see that there. And then the only other remaining property that's undeveloped, that's kind of a question mark, that could be sitting there for 5 or 50 years is a remaining parcel out here that was set aside for the school district for a middle school or high school site. And it's not likely that the school district would give that up for the foreseeable future, but if they ever did sell that property, it could allow for 150 more homes to be built. And so beyond that, that's pretty much it. The City Council laid out 8 goals and 27 objectives attached to those goals, and then prioritized all those 27 objectives, and the top 8 of those objectives that were prioritized. Some are kind of standard, hey, stick to business practices, make it a sustainable city, solid budget, and so forth. But the 4 that really stand out as kind of legacy or new initiatives this year that I want to emphasize is one on tourism, affordable housing, community pool, and Riverwalk. And so I'll just run through those real quick. On a tourism plan, this isn't a total rebuild or remake. This is more of a question of one of the driving documents that we've been doing a lot with was the Roger Brooks Destination Development Branding Plan from about 13 years ago. And that pretty much tells it right there. A lot of these other plans and processes fell out of that. There's even the master plan for the Richard Anderson's Railway History Campus here. That was the first concepts of what could be done out there. But much of this circulated around that branding plan that was 13 years ago. And the problem, of course, is 13 years later, there's a lot of, although there was extensive community involvement then, or from the council members, there was a lot of folks that were not around or not familiar with that. Much has been accomplished, some that's not so relevant anymore. And so the thought is we need to do a refresh and relook at all this and update the plan, determine what's relevant, what do we need to refocus on. And so the council made that a priority with the planning department to go in that direction. On the affordable housing plan, the council has set aside up to $200,000 to do an in-depth study on how can we be more aggressive about getting after and meeting this dire need for many folks in this community, including the business community. And so aside from looking at existing land use and looking at things like can we do accessory dwelling units or tiny houses, look at increased density for redevelopment, or tax policies, incentives, as Aya said, or like we have a Koinonia property down there with a $250,000 from another development for grants. Can we find some way to incentivize more? But the biggest emphasis area will be on that Snoqualmie Hills west area, that senior housing project was determined. It wasn't that that was such a bad product, it's just that the volume of it was 800 and we were kind of caught flat-footed because we just hadn't given much thought to what did we want here? What does the community need, and what would be the most appropriate sort of uses for the remaining urban growth area of Snoqualmie if that's going to come forward for development? So the council wants to get into a posture where we're proactive and we do a lot of that work ahead of time so we can communicate to any developer as to what this community wants, and we think workforce housing is a big piece of that, but we want to, so part of that plan will be really looking at how do we plan for and zone for that properly. On the community center, of course, there's been a lot of push to, can we get on with the second phase or have a pool in the community center? Something most of you are familiar with the history. Back in 1918, it was a bit rough and tumble at the Weyerhaeuser Mill. They gave a bunkhouse to the guys that worked in the woods as a place to recreate and relax, but it often turned into a place where they were drinking and smoking and fighting a lot. And so they quickly, within a year, brought the YMCA in to civilize the place and bring some morals to it. By 1924, they built a hall that served the community until 1971. And when you talk to the folks that were involved in the Snoqualmie Ridge development, like Pat Anderson or Dave Batty and Colleen Johnson, they were kids growing up and said this was such a central core. This was like the living room of the whole valley in terms of, and had such a valley. And that really got infused, a conversation about the ridge that started a little more than 14 years after this was closed. It was imbued in the master plan. Here's one of the early concept drawings of the Snoqualmie Ridge. You can see the parkway. And a lot of these elements have moved around, but oddly enough, the one that kind of stayed in the same location is the community center right here. But that's where the mitigation of some $3 million for the community center was set aside. So in 2002, the first attempt was to put a bond out there. A lot of the new residents just didn't want a community hall like the old Weyerhaeuser one or YMCA. They wanted a pool as well. So we were pushing out with the whole enchilada to build everything. It started in those days with a population of 3,800, a 39,000 square foot facility. What you'll see here is, here's the trend. The population continues to rapidly increase in the three failed voted attempts. 2002, 2006, 2008, the population is growing from close to 4,000, 8,000 to over 9,000. The size of the facility for every failed attempt, because the costs are going up, is shrinking by about 5,000 square feet per attempt in order to bring costs down. The cost is either staying the same or rising as the size is going down. And you can see because the population is increasing and more people can contribute to paying for it, the cost per thousand is dropping. And the last one we really got down low because that was the one where a lot of the surveys from the community directed us to say, hey, you need to find a partner that can reduce the costs, and that's when we hooked up with the YMCA to do that. And we thought that proposal was a slam dunk. All the surveys said that has strong support. But timing is everything, folks. Look what year that happened, 2008, right when we went into the Great Recession. So in that respect, it's probably remarkable that we got 55% yes vote on that, but we needed a 60% supermajority on a capital bond, so that failed as well. So at that point, we said, you know what, we got to stop letting the purchasing power of this money disappear. Let's step back. We'll build what we can with the money on hand. There was no voted levy, no tax increase. Population was now approaching 11,000. Now we have a facility that's about a third of the size of the original first bond we threw out there, and built it with the $5 million we had on hand. $1 million from a grant the YMCA got, $1 million we put in, the $3 million from the developer, and built this beautiful facility. One of the most successful in the country, frankly, even though it doesn't have a pool. The Y was a phenomenal partner for us because they were one of the only ones, when we went out and researched everybody, that served all ages. They really kind of provided what we would want to see in a city-run community center in terms of all, a full A to Z programming. Phenomenal record of success with running everything from gyms to pools, their regional resources in terms of camps like Orkila and Camp Terry, and just lowest cost overall. And the most important thing was accessibility. That's the advantage of a public-run community center, is it's accessible to all. And their policy is no one should be turned away by lack of access, and so they will scale or move that for anyone that says they have a need to get in there, or provide scholarships. And the cool thing was it kind of came full circle and embraced the history by having them be the operator of our community center. And then they've been surveying the community, and so one of the questions asked of their current members was reasons for being less than satisfied with your membership. And the top three, in excess of 70%, at 38%, no pool, facility too small, need more equipment because oftentimes they go there to do on the running track and it would be completely full and you couldn't find a space. So again, significant, showing that as this community has grown significantly, there's just, the communities, you saw a new trailer or mobile home show up on the site because it's just busting at the seams and it's simply not big enough to serve the community. When asked what do members want and are not finding at the Y, it was just absolutely off the charts at 77% pool and aquatics. And then they asked questions like, what would you feel about the city using existing funds for the YMCA or community center if it involved no tax increase and no impact on existing city services or facilities and capital needs? And it was a combined 64% probably support or definitely support. So we did a recent analysis on that to determine, well, how do we compare to other communities, particularly on recreation, because that partnership with the Y has really let us be alleviated from a significant burden on recreation. And we took a comparison to 4 other like communities in terms of being young, family-centric type communities like Mercer Island, Maple Valley, Issaquah, and Sammamish. And on a per household basis, their parks maintenance and operation, just to maintain their parks, runs about $242 for the average of these 4 communities. We're at $535, so it's kind of an eye-popping big number for us. But it's also because if you look at the acreage, we just compared to those communities have 3 times as much per household at 0.15 acres per household versus 0.05 for the average of these 4 communities. So it's what makes a phenomenal quality of life, but then it costs much to do that. But we're doing it at a pretty efficient cost as well when you look down at the full-time equivalent employees that takes care of this. And again, these are kind of rough averages and a lot of variables in here, but even with some error built in, you can see that there's considerably more staffing that these communities are putting at two FTEs or 2 staff per 1,000 homes than we are at about a quarter staff per 1,000 homes. But you can see here, our rec and events is a pretty low number compared to their $242. We're only at $57 in terms of our investment in recreation and events for a total of $592. So the total, we're not too far north of some of these. In fact, we're right in line with a few of the high ones here. So one of the things I was kind of curious about was to say, there's been some sentiment to say, hey, this was a mistake to partner with the Y. We should have a real city-run community center. So I thought, okay, what would that look like? It cost the Y about $1.8 million annually to operate that facility. If we were to run it, we would probably, because we don't do the kind of rates they do for accessibility, we'd be lucky to garner maybe $1 million of revenue on site, which would leave about an $800,000 operating deficit. That would run out to about $191 per household in Snoqualmie. That would run this number right up in line with these other communities at about $240 per household. The total would be $783, so we're getting a little spendy. If we did an expanded one with the pool, and I'm just doing a real low ball here, folks. This is going from a 13,000 to about a 35,000 square foot facility. So, but I'm just going to low ball it, just at least doubling the cost from 1.8 to $3.6 million. And let's double the revenue as well. You'd still be running about a $1.6 million operating deficit. That's $382 per household. That would push our rec and events cost to $439. That would be pressure on the general fund. And push it upwards close to $1,000 per household versus $502 for the combination of those average communities. So more than double the average of their community in terms of those investments. That's why this is such a good deal for us. Now, if we do a deal with the Y, and we were to fund this with existing revenues, basically say, hey, we have a commitment to recreation and there's an unmet need as this community has grown and this facility doesn't serve it anymore, and we did upwards of a $300,000 to $500,000, and I'm going to go with the upper end, a $500,000 annual payment on a 20-year bond toward this, that would run about $120 per household. And at that rate, it would still put us well underneath the average of the other communities at 177 or 712 total. And of course, the 712 total would not be indicative of the rec or community center and pool costs. It would be indicative of just the amount of acreage we have or parks in general. So here's my proposal, what my administration will be pushing out, or the YMCA is supporting as well. To build a 22,000 square foot addition, that's 35,000 square feet total, with a 4 to 6 lane pool, including a warm water tank. We'll probably need other partners to guarantee that this is a 6 lane pool. And we also have all these other multi-purpose spaces, the need for just dry spaces as well as aquatic spaces to expand. The cost would run about $12.5 million. The Y would bring $2.5 million to that equation through grants and fundraising. And then we would bring about $10 million with $4 million in cash from one-time revenues from capital, from one-time activities or construction activities, and then about a $6 million bond. And that's what the group would look like. Earl's telling me I'm running out of time, so come to the town hall. It might be on the May 19th, but the council's re-exploring the dates right now. But look, stay tuned for a mid-May town hall meeting. We're going to focus strictly on this subject matter. So you can find out more then. And the last item on the goals and objectives is the Riverwalk. And this is just a quick review of, again, there's the master plan with all the trails, but the primary focus is on this stretch from down near the parkway into downtown. And I thought folks would like to see some of the schematic drawings that we're doing. This is right behind what will be, here's the bowling alley and the future Sigillos, and what this piece of the park would look like. And then I'm going to continue to move southward here as you see some of the designs moving toward the Riverview Park. We purchased a couple of houses here, bought those out with as flood properties, and Riverview will be expanded as part of that park. So a phenomenal asset for downtown. Again, it's all about rivers, roads, and railway. And that ties into the first objective on tourism as well, a big one. Quick touch on the I-90 interchange. Although this wasn't on the goals and objectives, this is definitely priority one for the council. They felt it was one that's outside of jurisdiction, but it was well in play. The only thing I'll say on that, they're getting into detailed configurations on that divergent diamond alignment. They still feel it's largely online to be constructed or completed by 2023. There's a couple of massive challenges that have been making Senator Millett and ourselves nervous about this. One is the location of the way station. We thought we had a solution at exit 45, but the costs on that went astronomically high, like close to $100 million over budget. And so they're back to looking at the North Bend exit. So North Bend's going to have some fun with conversations with WSDOT in the coming months. They decoupled. The state patrols let go of that and decoupled those issues, so at least they're moving forward on the interchange. But there's cost factors with this that need to be resolved, so they know how much money they have to do with the interchange. One configuration is to move this further down the ramp a little bit to get it away from the Waskowitz water well and so forth. But again, another big, huge obstacle, the State Department of Fish and Wildlife came back and said, hey, we discovered 14 new fish culverts around the project, 9 at the interchange itself. So apparently fish are being born at the interchange here in the ditches. We're a little skeptical of that. We've Jason Walker, who's right here, is a Duval City Council member. He's an environmental specialist with Petite, and the tribe, the Snoqualmie tribe, when we have both hired him and split the cost to have Jason take a real hard look at that. We've already made some progress to get some of those pieces out of the jurisdiction. The initial cost estimates added to that project was $30 million to deal with those culverts. That was part of that Supreme Court decision. So we think that's back on track to some degree, and the costs are coming down, but grateful Jason's involved. The Tulalip tribe actually has jurisdiction on this interchange here. And given that the Snoqualmie tribe has 40% of their employees coming up this interchange every day to get to work, they have a vested interest in making sure, finding some balance between environmental concerns, but also these traffic issues. The one way to mitigate any potential delays in the project is to make sure that we've been pushing really hard on getting a temporary access lane going westbound I-90 in the morning to get that mile-long backup on the parkway gone. And it would also alleviate for the traffic coming north. So one way to do that is to find a designated on-ramp. The WSDOT was very much against that, but with Senator Millett's help, they finally gave us a number of $1.2 million to build that lane. But we had to negotiate about a 50-50 cost share on that to do it. And anyway, I'm quickly running out of time. But good news is on Monday night, the last piece fell into place. I did go down, beat in the bushes with some of these other partners, Maple Valley Covington, that garnered some additional monies that reduced our cost share significantly. And with a realignment using the way station road, that cost will maybe go down by an additional $100,000. Cost about $20 a year per car for a car tab fee to make that happen. I think there's strong support in our community for that, given that about 65% of our residents go out that door every morning. Last year I talked about the bond we did and much of the construction, most at the way station, at the treatment plant. The big projects coming up this year is to finish a lot of the streets around one of the major geographical areas of downtown, this triangle called the Delta Streets for Alpha, Beta, Gamma. And these are the streets that are going to come online and have a full rebuild of all the utility infrastructure from curb to curb and so forth. The good news is that these are in a bit better shape, and we think we can retrieve and not have to rebuild all the sidewalks and save a couple, $2 or $3 million by not doing that. All of this is paid for by, which most communities are doing, incremental price increases and utility fees. But as was pleased to see that even in this year, we slipped down on the averages where we're below average in terms of cost. And this is where, again, by getting all of our infrastructure in a proactive mode, we're really delivering high value for the price to the community. So with that, did I land on time, Earl?
Perfect.
All right. Thank you all. And again, thank you to Ken Hearing for all your service.